Hi, everyone. Hello. I'm going to wait a couple moments here for people to join in. Hi. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm so glad you could make it. I know I've put this off a few times, and it was a little outside of my control there for a little while, but here we are. I'm so glad that you all can join me. Thank you so much. This is my name in vinyl. That's never happened before. I'm going to be showing you my new exhibition, Impossible Tasks, tonight. I'm excited to share this with you. It's been such an interesting journey through this year to be putting together a new series of paintings and knowing that I have this exhibition on the horizon and being really excited about that opportunity. And then at the same time, as the date grew closer, realizing that this would be a very different kind of exhibition, which is what so many artists are dealing with right now, and so many people in general. Everything's just completely different from how it usually is, and this is no exception to that. But it's actually turned into a really beautiful and positive experience for me to have this be more of a kind of a closed exhibition, or an opportunity to have really intimate conversations with people about the work, as opposed to an in-person party, which I love also, don't get me wrong, and I would have loved to have had that, but this viewing of the exhibition in smaller little with people individually has yielded a lot of really wonderful conversations and a really intimate experience. And that's so fitting because so much of this exhibition is actually about intimacy and about love. And I think where I started with this, a few years ago, really, I got kind of obsessed with this book, which is A Lover's Discourse by Roland Barthes. He's a semiotician and a literary critic who was writing in the 60s and 70s, and he wrote this book in 1977, and I've been kind of obsessed with it over the past 5 or 6 years. As I've kind of delved into this pretty full-scale exploration of love, and just kind of seeking to understand it from all these different angles, like from a kind of a more intellectual standpoint, and to understand the boundaries of love, the bounds of love, and the expanses of love. Love is one of those topics that's often, it's huge. It looms huge in our lives. Obviously, it's a foundational element of our society and ourselves, and in our relationships, but it's not often given the kind of intellectual credence that a lot of other topics are in society, even though it's such an organizational principle that has everything to do with how our societies are put together. So I was really taken with this book because what Roland Barthes does in this book is he actually breaks down love into these 80 different chapters, or what he calls fragments or figures. And each of these small, short chapters describe a very specific aspect of the love experience. Some of them are really positive and beautiful and union-oriented, and others are very uncomfortable and kind of anxiety-ridden and melodramatic at times, which is all part of that love experience. So what my idea was to actually illustrate a painting or a piece for every single chapter in this book, so that would result in 80 paintings. And I did not accomplish that for this show, but I do have 15 of them here to show you. And I just want to read you a little piece from this book before I get started. So this is just sort of describing how he uses his words to describe these different figures in the love experience. These fragments of discourse can be called figures. The word is to be understood not in its rhetorical sense, but rather in its gymnastic or choreographic acceptation. The body's gesture caught in action and not contemplated in repose. The body of athletes, orators, statues, what in the straining body can be immobilized. So it is with the lover at grips with his figures. He struggles in a kind of lunatic sport. He spends himself like an athlete. He phrases like an orator. He is caught, stuffed into a role like a statue. The figure is the lover at work. Figures take shape insofar as we can recognize in passing discourse something that has been read, heard, felt. The figure is outlined like a sign and memorable like an image or a tale. A figure is established if at least someone can say, "That's so true. I recognize that scene of language." So that's what he undertook in his writing about love through these figures. And that's definitely what I undertook as well with these visual paintings. So I'd love to get started with that, but I also just want to give a few thanks here to begin with. I want to thank the Christopher West, who has helped me put all of this together. He's the amazing director of this gallery, and I feel so grateful to have this show here. To Nate and to the rest of the College of Marin team, to Miguel and David at Art Brokers for framing and photographing, and Smith Anderson North for their amazing frames. And I just really want to thank all of you again for being here. And the way that I'm going to show you these paintings now, I'm just going to go around and kind of show you each one and talk a little bit about them. And then I really can't keep an eye on the chat while I'm talking and going through, but I would love to take some questions at the end. So if you have questions or ask them throughout the presentation, that's great and that's fine, and I'll get back to you later after the live presentation is over. But if you have a question and you haven't asked it yet, you could hold on to it, and then at the end I'll try to take a few questions from the chat. So let's get started. I'll first give you a little overview. Let me see here. I got to figure out how to turn this around. So this is the gallery. I'm just going to give you a little overview of the space and kind of show you the full picture here. It's such a beautiful space, and I feel so lucky to be in here. So that's kind of that's the space itself. And then I think we'll actually start over here. And what I have to start with is actually a piece from my last series that I brought into this series because it really was such a starting point for this series. It was, that series was also starting to delve into some ideas of love and the innate value of love. This piece is called Fish Scales, and what it seeks to express is really, this preciousness of this object, or this, an object as a kind of metaphor for an idea or a feeling, and this kind of protective element that's involved with that. I don't want to spend over much time on this piece because it is from a previous series and some of you have seen this before. So we'll move on to this one. This is a big one that I spent a lot of time on. This really took me deep in. This one is called Salt Mines. And the chapter that it represents from the book is pleurer, or it's in French, it's to cry. So obviously that is a huge part of this. There's a lot of watery elements going on. My bird makes an appearance 7 times. So you can see my little conure in there. And with this painting, I was, really seeking to kind of express the particular flavor that goes along with crying, and that aspect of the love experience that's so important, this sort of welling over that can happen. And all the different kinds of welling over that can happen. There can be like a welling up, a spilling over. And one thing that Barthes talks about a lot in his book is this kind of performative aspect. As I read in that little introduction, there's this kind of performance aspect to the love experience, or certain parts of it, where there's this, this experiencing of a very deep emotion, but also a sort of imagining that that someone is witnessing that, or by having this very physical response to the love experience, it's sort of proven. The value is proven. So that's pleurer. And this one is called errance, or the end. I named it the end. This piece, errance in French means a kind of a wandering, like you hear about errant knights, like King Arthur's knights or errant knights, and they're wandering knights, wandering from here to there. And the idea behind this piece is that there's an end to the love experience, but you never really know when the end is going to happen. And usually you're kind of far from port when the love ends. A relationship may end, but that's not exactly necessarily the moment when love ends. Love usually ends in this very kind of quiet way, away from everything else, and it's sort of unrecognizable, except in retrospect. So this piece is sort of an end, but it's also a beginning. There's a port that one has left, and then there's a port on the horizon. This piece is called The Argument, or scène, la scène, the scene. And it describes this construction of language between two parties in a relationship. You have your two characters here. And what it is it's really kind of a mixed language. It's a language that is built in argument. And this is an interesting one because it definitely was influenced by love arguments that can happen, but it's also very much influenced by the kinds of arguments that we see taking place, across political lines and online, in a lot of forums online. And what I actually sought to represent here was these kind of logical fallacies that can take place in language and in the construction of language. So he has his comment, she has her charged retort, he has his emotional manipulation, she has her moral equivalence, and causal oversimplification, circular reasoning, anecdotal evidence, and then all the way up, kind of building this cathedral that a friend said yesterday, I think, that it's, this cathedral of language that's built on very shaky ground. So that's the argument. This is another piece from a previous series that I also brought in because it so well represented the idea of jealousy. And I don't think I want to go deep into the story of this one because it comes from a previous series as well. But I brought it in here to represent the jealous. This one's called Spellcast. This piece is overexposed. This is kind of an intense one. It was a funny one to work on. I'm so used to drawing and painting humans and human-like creatures, but I am not as used to working with anatomies without any skin. So this was interesting. The idea of this piece of overexposed is this kind of, in the French, it's écorché, literally meaning flayed, to lose one's skin. And it's this feeling in the love experience when you're so sensitized by being in love or experiencing this intense desire that you literally feel like you have no skin, like anything that anybody says or does kind of just hits you right where it hurts. And there's this kind of sense that, there's no sense of humor possible. And one is, beyond the love experience or beyond that particular feeling, it feels almost ridiculous that one could feel that intensely. So I think that this one kind of expresses the humor in the melodrama. This piece, this is called Declarations. This is kind of a little bit of a continuation of the argument piece that I was showing you before, because this is also all about language. But this is about the construction of a kind of a positive language. This is the love language. And I chose to express that through kind of a visual representation of what a text feed between two lovers might look like, were it not stored in the phone, but instead encircled around the two participants in the conversation. There's this language that's formed between lovers, and it kind of encases the love relationship in this protective layer, and takes, the words take on this meaning of their own. I was working on a project once in a relationship where I was actually thinking about recreating the entire text feed in sculpture form, and this is kind of the painterly version of that. When you think about the amount of conversation and language that goes into some of these conversations via text, it's like it would add up to miles and miles and miles of paper or whatever this might be made out of. So that's Declarations. I'm going to skip this one right now, and we're going to move on to this one. This one is Images. I skipped the one in between because this one is really kind of the counterpoint to the one that we just looked at, which is Declarations are very much about words. And this one is all about images, and it's about the images that one experiences in relationship, the memories that one builds in relationship, but then those memories go on to kind of form these images in one's brain. Or the name of this piece is actually called Simulacra. So the representation of the thing, but not the thing itself. So these memories that were formed in our love relationships then go on and kind of form this world of their own, and in some cases actually take the place of the experience itself. And when one thinks about the love relationship, what one is actually thinking of is these images that the brain has formed to kind of represent the experience, and not thinking necessarily about the experience itself, because the memory is changed every time one examines it. But it's also these, important markers that we hold on to, and they can haunt us, these images or these memories, or they can keep us in thrall, or they can turn into their own thing completely. So that's Simulacra. This piece might be a little bit hard to see. The lighting is challenging. This is one of my favorite pieces in the show, and it was a really special one to create. This one is called The Night Illuminated the Night, and it represents the chapter called Nuit, or Night. I actually would like to read a little passage from the book, so I'm gonna go grab that book and just read you guys a little bit about this painting. Let's see. So the idea with this painting was, the lighting is so hard. The idea with this painting was to try to create something that was almost entirely black. And it's very difficult to tell in this light, but all of the colors in this painting are all, the foundational color in each of them is black. So even with these yellows and greens that you see, the basis of the color is black. And then the characters are outlined with graphite. So when the lighting is low, all you see is these graphite, shimmery, silvery lines. You might be able to see this character. And the color kind of fades away and everything looks black except these shimmery graphite lines. So this is what Barthes has to say about night. I experience alternately 2 nights, one good, the other bad. To express this, I borrow a mystical distinction. Most often I am in the very darkness of my desire. I know not what it wants. Good itself is an evil to me. Everything resounds. I live between blows, my head ringing. But sometimes, too, it is another night, alone in a posture of meditation. I'm going to turn away from that for a second and talk to you guys. But sometimes, too, it is another night, alone in a posture of meditation. I think quite calmly about the other, as the other is. I suspend any interpretation. I enter into the night of non-meaning. Desire continues to vibrate. The darkness is transluminous, but there is nothing I want to grasp. This is the night of non-profit, of subtle, invisible expenditure. I am here, sitting simply and calmly in the dark interior of love. So that's meant to kind of express these two aspects of the night experience, that anxiety and then also the sweet relief that's brought by this restful period. I wish you guys could see that one better. This is a bit of a companion. This is called Ritual Union. And this is very much about like the sexual experience. It's about this kind of communion of love making and of ecstasy. And there's this character that's at the center of it. And she has this partner, but the partner is kind of like the night sky itself. And it's this ecstatic union between them. And I utilize this element of the concentric circles here to express these very sensitized points in sexual union, where there's this communion with nature and with everything that's magical in the universe. And this kind of extra sensitivity emanating from these points of contact. So that's Ritual Union. This piece is the namesake of the show. This is called Impossible Tasks. And it is meant to represent the chapter in Barthes' book called Affirmations. And what this chapter is all about, it's a really kind of incredible concept that I've been thinking about a lot, which is the innate value of love. And the chapter is all about the affirmations, the affirmation that love is of this extreme, it has this extreme innate value to it, even though it's rife with disappointments and there's no real tangible value to it, and yet we continue to invest in it. We invest our labor in it. We invest our time in it. We invest basically everything we've got into the love experience. And there's this storyline that shows up in a lot of fairy tales and mythology. And it's the trope of the impossible task. And what this storyline is that a lover, a character, a hero or a heroine has to fulfill these impossible tasks in order to prove his or her love to the loved object. And that kind of shows up again and again in folklore and mythology from all over the world. So in this visual representation, I wanted to show the myth of Psyche and Eros, Greek myth. Psyche is a human, And Eros is, of course, the god of love, the son of Aphrodite. Aphrodite doesn't like this match because Psyche is human. And so she sets these impossible tasks before Psyche, and then Psyche has to fulfill these duties in order to be able to win the love of Eros. So the first task that she sets for her is that Psyche has to sort this mountain of grains and rice and lentils from one another in just a few short hours. It's this gigantic mountain. It's completely impossible. And yet, these ants show up, these cute little ants, and they help Psyche to sort them all out. And in that way, by working with nature, she's able to accomplish this task. The second task that Psyche has to fulfill is she has to collect the golden fleece from these very fierce rams. But again, she receives this tip-off from a source in nature that if she waits for these rams to go to sleep, she'll be able to safely gather the fleece. Then the third task she has to fulfill is she has to capture this water from the mouth of the river Styx, and the mouth of the river Styx is at the top of this very steep, treacherous cliff that's really impossible to get to, and it's guarded by dragons. And yet, with the help of this eagle, she's able to fill her cup and bring it back to Aphrodite. And then her fourth and final task is the most treacherous of all. She has to go to the underworld and fetch from Persephone, the queen of the underworld, a little bit of cream to bring back to Aphrodite. And again, she receives help from nature. Well, actually, she receives help from a tower of all things. So it's not from nature, but it's this kind of mysterious, symbolic helper who tells her that if she brings 2 coins in her mouth, she'll be able to pay for her trip across the river Styx on the way to the underworld, and then pay for her trip back across the Styx on her way back up. And that she also must bring some bread soaked in honey in her right hand, and some bread soaked in honey in her left hand. That way, she can feed the 3-headed dog of the underworld, Cerberus, on her way down with the loaf of bread soaked in honey, and then again on the way back up. These are Cerberus's former visitors. So in this way, Psyche's able to fulfill these impossible tasks and thereby prove her love. And she's willing to undergo these extreme labors in order to get the love that she wants. So that's that piece. There's a lot of story in that one. This one is called The Trap. And it refers to the chapter in the book called Catastrophe. I was thinking a lot about symbols, visual symbols for catastrophe, this feeling of, impending doom in a relationship. Everything might be fine, and yet somehow we can get these panicked feelings that things are not going to be fine. And I started looking at insect-eating plants and went down a pretty deep wormhole with that. And these, I really fell in love with this particular kind of pitcher plant. And what's interesting about them is that these wasps who are surrounding them, these wasps actually live off of these plants as well. And yet, if they get too close to them, then they will get eaten by them. So it's this kind of, it's a relationship that works. They both get something from it, and yet it's also this very dangerous, treacherous kind of relationship. It's fun seeing your comments pop up on the side, everyone. Thank you. This is also one of my favorites. This is called Knots, and it expresses the chapter called comprendre, or to understand, comprehension. So this trio, or these three representations of one creature, have a real problem on their hands. They're very wrapped up in this knot situation. In fact, they're living in this world of knots. And they're trying to figure out how to resolve this knotty situation. And one of them is working experientially with the knot itself, seeking through senses of, touch and sight to unwind the knot. And then this one is working it out intellectually. She's drawing different types of knots on her little chalkboard here. She's doing her math. She's thinking about how to resolve the situation using her brain. This one's also using her brain, but she's really cutting to the chase. She's not wanting to unwind the knot or figure out how the knot works. She's just wanting to cut right through it. So that's the knots. Then we have this duo, and I'm going to show you them both together because a lot of people who have seen them together express how important it is for them to be seen together. This one's called Overcast, and it represents nuage, the French word for clouds. So when I was originally thinking about this piece, I was kind of thinking about traditional clouds and a kind of a cloud cover that can fall over one, a darkening of the skies. These kinds of clouds that may kind of portend some kind of storm ahead. But then what was actually happening in my life at that point was that I started painting this sky on the day of the orange sky in San Francisco, when the Marin layer and the wildfire smoke were one and the same, and it was just this very bleak, bizarre, post-apocalyptic morning in California, which I know many of you will be able to relate to because you experienced it like I did, and I think probably most of you who are on the East Coast and elsewhere heard about it because it was such a big deal. So my cloud kind of became this different kind of cloud, this orange sky cloud. So we have both kinds of clouds in this. She's encapsulated in the orange sky cloud, and she's kind of standing on the sweeter kinds of clouds that we think of when we think of clouds. That's Overcast. This piece is called Engulfment. And what's interesting about this piece is that, there's some amount of destruction of self happening here, but not in a negative way. It's like a dissolving of self, a giving over of self completely to the experience of love. And so in that way, there's this part of her that's kind of leaking out into the waters that surround her. And then there's this, that the waters themselves are also coming into her. And they're becoming one and the same. So it's this kind of loss of self in a way, but in a beautiful way. That's engulfment. And as usual, socks make an appearance. There are a lot of socks in my work. I know you guys have noticed that in the past. Some of you have. I was talking to some friends about why socks make an appearance and how they make an appearance in my work, and we were thinking about how they kind of ground a piece in some kind of human element that, there's a lot of serious kind of emotions that go into each piece, and they add a little bit of humor and a little bit of humanity and some grounding into some of the pieces. And they're just cute fashion, which is also important to me. Okay, so this piece is the marionettes. In the French, it's dépendance or dependence, or maybe codependence. So what we see here is this master or mistress of puppets who seems herself to have some strings extending up above her. She's the queen, but she may not be the very top queen. She seems to be controlling this marionette. And he seems to be controlling this marionette. But she's doing a little bit of seizing of the marionette strings. Some of those strings are beginning to break. So this piece is, very much about that sense that one can have in a love relationship where one's emotions and sense of self can be entirely dependent upon how another may be acting, treating one. There's a potential loss of self that can happen if one's not careful. And now I'm going to show you this last one, and I kind of wanted to save this one till the end anyway, because this was the one that I saved for the end for myself to paint. I knew I wanted to paint this piece all along, but I wanted to save it to the end because it's this very, warm, beautiful experience of love. The name of the painting is Tendresse, which is the same as it is in the book, the French version. And of course it means tenderness. We have little Sprite Kitty making an appearance. We have a little baby and some motherly love. We have a little bunny. What I really wanted to express through this piece is that tender feeling. There can be so much drama and chaos in different kinds of love relationships, but then there's this just very sweet, warm aspect to the love experience that has to do with tenderness and care. And during these times especially, this one was one that gave me so much comfort. I sought to kind of create this illusion of almost like a campfire kind of feeling with it, where there's this sort of darkness on the outside and this warm glow on the inside. I had a lot of fun playing with layering of colors from this greenish, whitish, bluish, and then these orange hues that are overlaid. A lot of different faces happening in there. I wish you guys could be here. I try to remember all the little bits and pieces that I want to show you, but it's not the same as having you actually here to look at them. So, I think that's all, my friends. Let me turn this around again. Those are my pieces. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm definitely happy to answer any questions that any of you may have if you want to chime in. There may have been some questions along the way, and I'll get to those. Thank you so much, you guys. Thanks, everyone. So, also there's, it is possible to see these works. If any of you want to reach out to me directly, we can figure out a way for you to come and take a look at them. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for being here. Oh, it's great to see you all. Yeah, so if you get in touch if you're curious, if you want to see price lists, if you want to know more information about any particular piece. I'd love to share more with you. It's a lot to share all the pieces all at once. Ooh, I see a question. Sarah's asking, Night Becomes Night is such a stunning piece and so different from the work you've done in the past. Maybe this is obvious given these times, but can you speak to why you felt inspired to make this kind of departure for this particular show? Yeah. There's a lot of facets to that night piece. When I originally envisioned that piece, all I could envision was that it was just black. And so the little thumbnail sketch that I did for that piece is just totally black. There was a moment this year that I think we're all familiar with where the black square popped up on Instagram. And there was a lot of challenge, I think, for all of us in thinking about racial equity, thinking about what that black square represented, thinking about whether it was appropriate for us to put that black square up or not, and what it represented to each one of us individually. So something I've been thinking about a lot in my work is color, and how color it can represent, what we see visually, and how I create paintings using colors. But then there's this other aspect of the color conversation in our society that's just so fraught right now, so interesting, which has to do with racial equity and with melanin in skin. And so I was thinking about the color black a lot, and thinking about trying to compose colors made of the color black and what that meant to me. I was really grappling with a lot of how I feel as a white female artist, working with color, working with painting people of color or not painting people of color, and how how I approach my subjects and try to have integrity with how I'm presenting the subjects that I'm approaching, and how color can play into that, and what kind of experience I can portray as a white woman, and what kinds of experience are not appropriate for me to convey as a white woman. So my night painting sort of became, in addition to being about nighttime, it also became a meditation on black squares and what that process was like for me. You hit on an intense subject there, so yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if there have been other questions that have popped up. Let's see. Oh, question from Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle asks, what materials are you using, watercolor and ink? And yes, thank you. I am using watercolor a lot. Watercolor is my primary medium for sure. I also use gouache, and I definitely use ink as well, and sometimes graphite. And in some cases I use a flash paint, which is more of like a kind of a latex-based paint, but I didn't use very much of that in this series. It was mostly layers and layers of watercolor. And yeah, I kind of just throw them on there as I will. There's a lot of like painting layers and then dredging up color and then painting them again and dredging up more. So I use watercolor really non-traditionally. I make a huge mess and then I see if I can clean it up. Thanks for asking that. Oh, here's a question. Stephanie asks, hi. She says, I missed the very, very beginning. Why this book? What was the original inspiration? Yeah, so as I did explain at the beginning, I've just been kind of obsessed with this book for a while. In the past few years, I've kind of undertaken these different experiences of love, different love affairs, and seeking to understand the love experience from a lot of different angles. And this book in particular really lent itself to that exploration because it sought to create this kind of taxonomy of love in a way that I had never seen before. There's, a lot of poetics around love, a lot of songs about love and art about love, but this seemed to try to explore it, to kind of create some categories of it that I had never seen, and it kind of appealed to both my left brain and my right brain. So that's why I chose that. I think that might be all the questions. Let's see if there were more. Oh, hi Dee, through Rebecca. And Dee's asking if he can see these in person, and I would say, Dee, let's talk offline and we can figure out a way. Yeah, these definitely exist in real life, and we can find a way to let you see them. That would be amazing. So I will reach out. And yeah, I think that's probably all for now, unless there are any last minute questions anybody has. I really appreciate you all being here so much. It means so much to me. I was a little bit nervous. It's always a little bit intense doing these things. It's strange to have a party alone by myself, but I'm glad you guys were here with me virtually. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys are all doing well. I'll talk to you later.